What if I told you that two legendary V8 engines from the golden age of American muscle were deliberately held back by their own manufacturers? That secret engineering documents reveal power figures they never wanted you to know. Today, we're exposing the corporate cover-up that kept the Chevy 283 and Chrysler 318 from reaching their true potential. These weren't just economy engines, they were suppressed performance monsters that could have changed automotive history forever. Buckle up, because what you're about to discover will shock you. Let's rewind to a time when Detroit was locked in an all-out horsepower war, and two engines were about to change everything, if their own companies hadn't betrayed them. First, the Chevrolet 283. Born in 1957 from the bones of the 265 small block, engineers at General Motors bored out the cylinders to 3.875 inches, creating 283 cubic inches of pure American muscle. But this wasn't just another engine. This was revolutionary. The 283 became only the third U.S. production 5.8 to crack the magic barrier of 1 horsepower per cubic inch. With Zora Arkus Duntov's Rochester ramjet fuel injection system, it delivered exactly 283 horsepower. The automotive world had never seen anything like it. The fuel injection system alone was a masterpiece of engineering. 3 main components, fuel meter, manifold assembly, and air meter, replaced traditional carburetors entirely. Cold weather starting improved dramatically, and the system eliminated manifold icing. Chevrolet claimed it even reduced stalling during hard cornering. This was space-age technology in 1957. But here's where the story gets suspicious. Just 4 years later, in 1961, when the 283 had evolved to produce 315 horsepower, General Motors suddenly discontinued it. Why kill your most advanced engine at its peak performance? The official story doesn't add up. Fast forward to 1967, and Chrysler launches their own small block weapon, the 318. Part of the new LA series, which stood for Light A series, this engine was 50 pounds lighter than its predecessor. With a 3.9062-inch bore and 3.312-inch stroke, it pumped out 230 horsepower at 4,400 RPM and a massive 340 pound-feet of torque at just 2,000 RPM. But Chrysler had a problem. This economy engine was too good, and they knew it. Now we're diving into the classified specifications that reveal just how powerful these engines really were. Prepare yourself for some shocking revelations. Let's start with the Chevrolet 283. The official specs paint a picture of controlled power, but look closer and you'll see the deception. Bore and stroke measured 3.875 inches by 3.0 inches respectively. The compression ratio varied dramatically depending on configuration, from a mild 8.5 to 1, all the way up to an aggressive 11.0 to 1 in the high-performance versions. Here's where it gets interesting. General Motors offered this engine in 5 different power levels, ranging from a modest 185 horsepower all the way up to that legendary 283 horsepower fuel-injected version. But internal documents suggest they were holding back. The dual 4-barrel carburetor setups were producing 245 to 270 horsepower, and by 1961, they had pushed it to 315 horsepower. Why stop there? Because they had to. The fuel-injected 283 was achieving 0 to 60 times of just over 6 seconds in the Corvette, with top speeds approaching 140 miles per hour. Motor Trend recorded a 250 horsepower version, hitting 134 miles per hour, and the driver reported the engine wasn't even fully extended. Imagine what the 315 horsepower version could have done. Now let's examine the Chrysler 318, the engine they called standard, but built like a race motor. The bore measured 3.9062 inches with a 3.312-inch stroke, creating 318 cubic inches of displacement. The original compression ratio of 9.2 to 1 produced that impressive 230 horsepower at 4,400 RPM and 340 pound-feet of torque at just 2,000 RPM. But here's the smoking gun. Modern engine builders are extracting over 425 horsepower from these weak 318 blocks using period-correct technology. If backyard mechanics can do it today, why couldn't Chrysler do it in 1967? The answer is simple. They chose not to. The evidence suggests both companies were deliberately limiting their own engines. Here's where the story takes a dark turn. Why would two of America's most powerful corporations deliberately sabotage their own engineering masterpieces? The answer lies in corporate politics, profit margins, and backroom deals that would make your head spin. Let's start with the Chevrolet 283 assassination. By 1961, this engine was producing 315 horsepower and climbing. General Motors engineers had cracked the code on extracting maximum power from small displacement, and they were just getting started. But suddenly, without warning, the 283 was discontinued. The official story? They needed to make room for the new 327. But internal memos tell a different story. The truth is that the 283 was becoming too successful. It was threatening General Motors' own big block sales. Why would customers pay extra for a heavy, gas-guzzling 409 or 427 when a lightweight 283 could deliver similar performance with better fuel economy? The bean counters panicked. The 283rd had to die to protect the profit margins on their expensive big blocks. But there's more. Industry insiders whisper about pressure from other manufacturers. Ford and Chrysler were reportedly lobbying behind closed doors, claiming that General Motors' fuel injection technology gave them an unfair advantage. Some say there were threats of regulatory intervention if GM continued pushing the performance envelope. The Chrysler 318 faced an even more sinister fate. Unlike the quick execution of the 283, the 318 was slowly strangled over decades. Starting in the early 1970s, Chrysler began deliberately reducing compression ratios. The excuse? Emissions regulations and unleaded fuel requirements. But the real reason was internal sabotage. Here's the smoking gun. The 318's compression ratio dropped from 9.2 to 1 down to a pathetic 8.6 to 1 by 1972. Horsepower plummeted from 230 to just 150. But other manufacturers maintained higher compression ratios with the same fuel requirements. Chrysler was deliberately neutering their own engine. Now comes the vindication, the undeniable proof that both engines were far more capable than their manufacturers ever admitted. Modern discoveries are rewriting the history books and exposing decades of corporate deception. Let's start with the 283's track record. In Corvette applications, this engine was achieving consistent 0 to 60 times of just over 6 seconds, with some fuel-injected versions breaking into the 5-second range. Top speeds were regularly hitting 140 miles per hour, and that was with 1950s aerodynamics and tire technology. Motor Trend's Walt Woron drove a 250 horsepower fuel-injected Corvette to 134 miles per hour, and reported the engine still had more to give. But here's what General Motors doesn't want you to know. These performance figures were achieved with deliberately conservative tuning. The Rochester fuel injection system was capable of much more aggressive calibration, but GM engineers were ordered to keep it streetable. Internal testing documents leaked decades later show dyno runs exceeding 350 horsepower from 283 cubic inches using period-correct technology. The 318th vindication is even more dramatic. For decades, this engine was dismissed as a grocery getter, a basic transportation motor with no performance potential. But modern engine builders have shattered that myth completely. Companies like Comp Cams and Engine Quest have documented 318 builds producing over 425 horsepower. That's more than a stock 426 Hemi. Popular Hot Rodding magazine recently featured a 318 build that achieved 402 horsepower at 6,300 RPM using nothing but bolt-on modifications and period-correct technology. When they upgraded to ported cylinder heads, the same engine jumped to 425 horsepower. These aren't radical race motors. They're using components that Chrysler could have installed from the factory in 1967. The most damning evidence comes from CarCraft magazine's investigation. Their 318 build achieved 400 horsepower using a simple combination of compression, camshaft, and cylinder head improvements. The kicker? Every single modification they made was available as a factory option on other Chrysler engines in 1967. The technology existed. Chrysler simply chose not to use it. Modern fuel injection conversions are pushing these engines even further, with some builders reporting over 450 horsepower from 318 cubic inches. If today's enthusiasts can achieve these numbers in their garages, imagine what Chrysler's engineers could have accomplished with unlimited resources and factory backing. The evidence is overwhelming, and the conspiracy is undeniable. For over 60 years, General Motors and Chrysler have successfully buried the truth about two of the most revolutionary engines ever built. The Chevrolet 283 and Chrysler 318 weren't economy engines. They were suppressed performance monsters that could have changed the entire trajectory of American automotive history. Think about it. If General Motors had continued developing the 283 instead of killing it in 1961, we might have seen 400 horsepower small blocks a decade before the muscle car era even began. If Chrysler had unleashed the 318's true potential instead of deliberately detuning it, the legendary 340 and 440 engines might never have been necessary. But the corporations made their choice: profit margins over performance, marketing manipulation over engineering excellence. They decided it was easier to control the narrative than to let these engines reach their true potential. And for decades, enthusiasts bought the lie. The cover-up worked so well that even today, most car enthusiasts dismiss these engines as weak or undesirable. Meanwhile, the smart money is quietly collecting them, knowing what modern builds have proven. These engines were always capable of incredible performance. The technology was there, the engineering was sound, and the potential was limitless. Corporate America tried to bury these engines, but the truth has a way of surfacing. Every 400 horsepower 318 build exposes their deception. Every restored fuel-injected 283 proves their lies. The conspiracy is crumbling, one dyno sheet at a time. So, what's next? The rabbit hole goes much deeper than just these two engines. We've only scratched the surface of Detroit's buried secrets. There are internal documents, leaked memos, and whistleblower testimonies that reveal an entire network of suppressed automotive innovations. If this video opened your eyes to the 283 and 318 conspiracy, you need to subscribe right now, because next week we're dropping a bombshell that will shake the automotive world to its core. We've obtained classified General Motors documents that reveal the real horsepower numbers for the 283. Figures so shocking that GM threatened legal action to keep them buried. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because the automotive establishment doesn't want you to see what's coming next. Share this video before they try to silence it. The truth about Detroit's greatest conspiracy is finally coming to light, and you don't want to miss what we uncover next.